Welcome to another episode of Grace Under Pressure. It's a LinkedIn Live interview show that poses questions to thought leaders and doers whose ideas and action are helping us come to a greater understanding of ourselves and the greater opportunities that await us. My guest today is Dr. Anna Yusim, and I'll tell everyone about her in just a moment. But Grace Under Pressure, we're trying to reveal what's too often dismissed as the, quote, soft stuff. You know, the caring, the connecting, the commitment we feel toward one another's. Grace, for me, that's generosity we show, respect we give, and the compassion we demonstrate. Doing it as a leader, especially in our challenging times, requires the ability to act for others and energize others around us. So it's my opportunity to welcome Dr. Anna Yusim. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you so much, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Let me tell folks a little bit about you. You are a board-certified psychiatrist with a private practice in New York City, which is quite prestigious. You're also a lecturer at Yale Medical School, which is your alma mater for medicine. And you also, before that, you went to Stanford. But way before that, you came to this country as a 5-year-old from Russia, which I think is an interesting, as an immigrant and as a child, I think that gives you an insight into America that those native-born don't have. But I also think, since your career has been one of such grand achievements, you've been, I looked at your last list of publications, and it's over 70. So the whole interview, if I listed them, would take all our time. So anyway, but you also are the author of a wonderful new book, which I've read, called Fulfilled: How the Science of Spirituality Can Help You Live a Happier and More Meaningful Life. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you so much, John. What a beautiful welcome.
Well, great. First question. We're all under a lot of pressure these days. So what are people telling you about what they're feeling? What are the feelings that we have that you can quantify?
Yeah. So treating patients here in New York City, which was the first epicenter of the pandemic. Now, thank goodness, things are more under control, but my patients have really gone through the ringer, and myself and my husband included. We both got COVID as well. And when all of this was first starting, people were afraid for their health, for their livelihood, for their families, and also just for the future, because we were plunged into a level of uncertainty that was completely unprecedented. You know, we have this illusion of immortality, and we have this illusion of control over our lives. And something like this, a global pandemic over which we have so little control, actually shows us, wow, that control, it really is an illusion. They say that, you know, man plans, God laughs. And so this is very, very much in that vein, because everybody felt out of control. And so the question is, what do you do? How do you deal with your anxiety, with your depression? How do you deal with this collective trauma that we're all undergoing to pull ourselves out, land on our feet, and then move forward with grace and ease?
Interesting, because I hadn't thought of this. You used the word collective trauma, of course. Do we draw comfort from the fact that we're all in this together?
On some level, yes. I think that that's actually the unifying feature here. And it's not to say that we've all been equally affected. We know that certain groups, socioeconomic, racial groups, et cetera, have been disproportionately affected. And that's so important. And a lot of change and a lot of activism is actually coming out of that. That being said, there's no person that's been completely unaffected by this. And if you have, then, you know, you're very, very lucky. But the majority of my patients, nothing of that sort. I've had patients who've unfortunately lost friends and family members. People have lost their jobs. People have been furloughed. People haven't had food for their children sometimes. People, you know, I have had 2 family working parents, or, you know, 2 parents working. They need, you know, they weren't able to do childcare for their children, and they both have jobs. And so it puts pressure on people in a way that they never thought and never really experienced before. And then the question is, where to from here?
Right. One of the things that we all feel, but I think is perhaps not adequately addressed, is the sense of loss. So do we need to take time to mourn? Obviously, if we lose a loved one, that's one thing, but there's different kinds of loss, which could be my job, my workplace, my workmates. But what about loss? What perspective do you have on that?
There's, in addition to this being a collective trauma, this has also been an experience of collective grief. absolutely the grief and loss. And whether that loss is of our health, of our life, of our certainty, of the life that we used to have, of our cities, of the capacity to be able to go outside, of the capacity to go to Central Park without a mask, for instance. Not the case anymore. Now you put on your mask, which is a constant reminder. We are in pandemic. There is danger around. The world is not a safe place anymore. And so there's that grief, and we're grieving what used to be. We're grieving the safety that we took for granted that's only being really elucidated to us right now.
You mentioned the loss of certainty, which perhaps another word for that is ambiguity. What do you advise those of us feeling things are uncertain and ambiguous? Are there ways to cope with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. First, it's to recognize the legitimacy of whatever feelings people have and not to judge themselves, to remove the judgment from themselves. They're like, why am I not doing better? Why am I so anxious? Why am I depressed? You're depressed and you're anxious because this is a crazy situation and because you're a normal human being going through a crazy situation. And of course, individuals with pre-existing anxiety and depression, it can get exacerbated during a time like this. People with pre-existing conditions, it can just get worse. But the way to deal is, first and foremost, not judge oneself, to practice self-care, self-love, and self-acceptance. The second thing is presence, to really be present with what is. We don't want things to be as they are for the most part. We actually want things to be quite different. But presence is about accepting life on life's terms and being able to move forward in life, not necessarily as we may want, but the best that we can in a given set of circumstances. And then the third thing is really having a mindset of optimism to the degree that we're able, knowing that there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. We don't know what our world is going to look like after that, but you have to have faith in yourself, in your community and society, that things will get better and that we as a people can overcome this and have the resilience to move beyond.
Great. We've our world prior to this has had a certain degree of certainty to it, and maybe confidence too. Part of it, as I think, is our increasing our technological world. We'll always figure things out. This pandemic, coupled with economic uncertainty, and now racial injustice, which has come to the fore, that's everything's up in the air. Might there be some benefits from our life being less certain? And I don't mean in a personal suffering, but as a society. Do you have a perspective on that, Anna?
Absolutely. I think that out of all chaos,
Oh.
hello?
Yeah, we lost you there for a moment. You froze.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. Yeah. But what I was saying, was you're asking about the power of uncertainty to create positive change, or if there's any positivity in this.
Exactly.
Absolutely, because how do we grow as human beings, right? Pressure is what turns coal into a diamond. We're all being turned into diamonds right now. We have to be. We don't have a choice. We can either fall behind and be taken by this whole crazy thing, or to rise above and ask the question, how can we be more? How can we be better? How can we be stronger and more resilient and come out on top? And even if we do the best we can, we still may not have the outcome that we desire, but we certainly have to try. And it's precisely these kinds of opportunities of challenge and chaos that lead human beings to really expose the strongest and most resilient parts of themselves. And I truly believe that as people and as a society, we're going to overcome this.
Wonderful. I love that concept. What a wonderful image of we're all being turned into diamonds, from coal into diamonds. That's a powerful image. I'm going to keep a hold of that. Okay, now and you've spoken so eloquently about resilience. It's the flip side of this is we're also feeling fear. So what advice do you have for leaders in particular feeling fear? Should they admit it?
I, in general, believe authenticity and transparency is a huge, huge part of leadership. It's not about being a guru that everybody looks up to, sitting on, above everybody else. It's being somebody that other people can look up to because of your humanity and your compassion. So absolutely, to admit that you're feeling fear, to admit that you don't know. And from that space, say that you're going to do the best you can to take us out of here, to be able to lead us to the best of your ability as a human being, I think is hugely important. And as to how we deal with fear, there's many ways to answer that question. My favorite mnemonic with fear is FEAR, false evidence appearing real. The majority of fears really are just illusions. The worst case scenarios we imagine don't often come to pass. Sometimes they can and do. Certainly in this case, sometimes they have. But really to be able to use our fears to transform ourselves and to see the potential for growth within the fear.
Okay, right. Related to fear, you have a stress reduction meditation or exercise. Do you want to share? Can you share with us now? So
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of my favorite stress reduction exercises is a progressive body relaxation, where you start at the top of your head and you imagine starting right here, just as almost like metaphorically, because you're not going to tense up your head, but imagine it tensing up in your head and then releasing. And then tense up your forehead, tense it up and then release. And each time you do so, you do it with a breath. You breathe in, release. And now tense up your cheeks. Release. And then tense up your jaw. Release. And then tense up your shoulders. Release. Tense up your chest to the degree that you're able. Release. Tense up your elbows. Release. Tense up your stomach. Release. Tense up your fists. Release. Tense up underneath your belly button. Release. Tense up your hips. Release. Tense up your thighs. Release. Tense up your knees. Release. Tense up your calves. Release. And tense up your feet. Release. Often we don't even realize that we store so much pressure in our bodies. And this little exercise pinpoints the majority of your body parts, and one after the other enables you to feel the tension within that body part and then release it. And it could be a very simple little progressive relaxation technique that you can do anywhere with anybody, because even though you could see the person doing it a little bit, most people don't see it. So you can do it on a Zoom call. You can do it with your family. You could do it with your boss, especially if you're feeling any sort of anxiety.
that's wonderful. Why, these exercises also help me feel more physically grounded or physically centered. What's the physiology behind that, Doctor?
Absolutely, yes. The majority of these exercises, what they do is, one of the things they do is actually invite more oxygen into our system. When we are stressed and anxious, we're usually, without even realizing it, breathing really quickly. So we're hyperventilating. We're blowing off a lot of carbon dioxide and not taking very much oxygen in at all. This actually does the opposite. You flood your brain and body with oxygen as you're doing this release work. And what that does is, in addition to signaling your body to relax, by having so much oxygen and a net positive of oxygen in your brain is also signaled to relax. And the actual physiology is, you have two systems working in parallel: the sympathetic, which is your stress response, which is the fight or flight response, and the parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, and reproduce system. And so when you relax your body in this way, you're turning down the sympathetic and turning up the parasympathetic. So your body goes into more of a relaxation mode.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate the scientific, physiological. So I want to switch gears a little bit and reference your book, which is Fulfilled. And in there, you have a favorite passage. Why don't you explain it for us, please?
Sure. So thank you for letting me read some of my book here today. This is my
terrific read. So.
Thank you. And my book is about integrating psychiatry and spirituality, which is really what I've been doing in the last about 10, 12 years of my work. So I'm going to read a passage from there, and it's about the different people in my field, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and also Albert Einstein, and how they reconcile this question of science and spirituality. And it's a little passage on, in the introductory section on page 24, the science of spirituality. In much of medicine, there's a long-standing unfortunate split between science and spirituality. Sigmund Freud, the eminent Austrian scientist, neurologist, and founder of psychoanalysis, described belief in God as delusional and religion as a universal obsessional neuroses. Although Freud wrote about the oceanic feeling, the unspeakable wholeness, limitlessness, and awe when one becomes aware of a connection to something greater than oneself, he admitted to never having experienced the feeling personally. In contrast, Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung acknowledged the spiritual connection as being central to the human experience. He believed that life had a spiritual purpose beyond material goals, which entails discovering and fulfilling our deep innate potential. Jung believed that we are born whole and lose the sense of wholeness as we go through life. Connecting to this unity and our own transcendent nature was, for Jung, the way to restoring our inherent wholeness. Albert Einstein may have best reconciled Freud and Jung's opposing views. He wrote, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Science is always searching for that which is objectively measurable, quantifiable, testable, repeatable. In contrast, spirituality by definition is transcendent, subjective, and therefore difficult to measure and reproduce. It's not surprising, therefore, that spirituality means different things to different people.
Beautiful. I love that. And because you start with the skeptical, Freud, and Jung, who bridged the two. There is spirituality. And Albert Einstein, certainly one of our greatest thinkers, scientists of all time, bridged the both of them. So, and I know I've heard you lecture this before, that you as a psychiatrist meet people where they are. How do you explain that?
So meeting people where they're at to me means a person comes in with a certain issue. Usually they're in pain in some way, shape, or form. They could be anxious, depressed, having had a breakup, having lost their job, feeling like they keep repeating certain patterns that they don't understand. And then in addition to the issue, the presenting complaint, they also have a certain set of belief systems and worldviews. Meeting a person where they're at is meeting them at their worldview. I have a whole bunch of people, because of my book, which is about science and spirituality, who come to me with a spiritual perspective and looking for that specifically for me as a psychiatrist. Wonderful. We integrate the spiritual perspective. And by spirituality, I mean whatever for that person is their way of connecting to part of something greater, whether it be religion, whether it be a spiritual practice, whether they're meditators, whether they're yoga practitioners, whatever it is, we integrate that into the approach. But I also have plenty of people who come and don't believe. They're atheists, they're non-believers, they don't want spirituality at all to be a part of this. So meeting people where they're at means using more psychological tools, psychiatric tools, whatever it is that the person wants. And that's why I don't feel that there is a one-size-fits-all approach. Every person needs a unique, individually tailored approach that's really geared towards that person, where we can meet them where they're at and help them grow from that point.
It's a wonderful expression. And as you were saying this, what I really reflected on is where you're meeting people where they are is really something that leaders must do with those that they lead. You know, they must understand the needs and wants and aspirations of their followers and deal with them. Doesn't mean you, and so I like you, I mean, you as a therapist, a psychiatrist, a therapist, it's a different perspective, but the understanding is there. And more importantly, the underlying notion that you're saying, Anna, is respect. And respect is the root of what we're talking about. So this is exciting stuff. So you have told me that you are now transitioning, in addition to all your psychiatry work, you are an executive coach. So what for you is the difference? How are you balancing that?
Yeah, so in my practice, I have treated executives since day one. I have a number of CEOs, I have a number of professionals, individuals who have other professional coaches, and I find that so often the role that I play and the professional executive coaches have played have blurred. And so over time for me, it's made sense to transition into that role. Of course, I'm still going to stay as a psychiatrist, but also now I'm starting to do executive coaches for executives, whether it be professionals or C-suite executives who are looking to grow as people and who will value the unique background I also have as a psychotherapist and a psychiatrist. As an executive coach, it's a very different process. It's a very different set of goals, etc. But the work is really the same in helping a person to uncover what keeps them stuck and how they can move forward despite that.
Oh, I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I have a few colleagues who have a psychiatric or executive coaches who have a psychiatric background. So it's very exciting. Me personally, I wish you guys would stay out of our world, but, but that's just.
I think we can all play in the same sandbox. I think we can all work together.
I'm just, hey, well, you know what? This is actually, I was saying that in jest, but if as our commitment to the coaching practice is, and I know you and I are both members of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches, and we are dedicated to, if we have one thing we share with one another's, the diversity of points of view and perspectives only enriches our understanding of coaching, and ultimately how we can be more effective to those we serve. So more. We're all learning from one another.
It's all about helping people to grow in any area, as a psychiatrist, as a coach, or as a friend. In any way, we're really there to help.
That's great. And I think also, is there something from your experience as you came here as a child and you grew up in perhaps a foreign land, which soon became your home country, any lesson in resilience that resonates for you today that you can share with us?
Absolutely. I feel like, coming to this new land where we had nothing, where we had to make ourselves anew, both my parents and myself, it really was about enabling yourself to take in what this world gives you, to take in all the resources and make of yourself who you are. I think being an immigrant and coming at the age of 5, it's enabled me to be self-made, and I'm so grateful for that. We never had anything to stand on. We never had anything but ourselves and our own capacity and ambition and abilities, etc. So that's been incredibly powerful. And yet at the same time, I realized, oftentimes that some of the most difficult cases that come to me are individuals, because it was also hard to be an immigrant. You have nothing. There were days my family didn't have food. That happened. That was a reality. One of the most difficult things I feel is actually the exact opposite. To have nothing and to have to make yourself is a positive thing. It was a gift. To have everything and then to be able to take that for granted is actually much more of an issue because it breeds entitlement. And some of the most difficult things for me to treat is when people have that entitlement and don't have the motivation to make of themselves that which they want. They feel stuck. They don't want to try. They don't want to make the effort because they feel like it's just supposed to come naturally to them. But that's the exact opposite. Actually, to make anything happen in our lives, we have to work really, really hard. That's the perspective that I've come from.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. And thank you for sharing it. One of the principles of grace, and I gained in my research into the topic, is the notion of scarcity versus abundance. And certainly what your immigrant experience was, you came from scarcity and you worked in scarcity, and through your hard work, you are now in a world of abundance. But the other side of abundance is sharing. Do you have a perspective on that?
100%. And I feel that the more that we take, the less happy we are. The more that we give, the happier we are. It's really all of life is about figuring out ways to share our energy, share our talents, share our skills, share with others, and really devote our lives to others. Of course, we can't take care of others unless we take care of ourselves first. So it's not a zero-sum game. You have to take care of yourself first. Make sure that you are healthy and energetic and doing what you need to fill yourself up before you help others. But all of the science shows that actually the more generous you are, the more giving you are to others, the more that you're able to also, in terms of money and tithing and charity and things of that nature, the more of those things you have going on, the more happiness and fulfillment comes to you. We think if we hold on to our money, if we hold on to our things, that's going to make us happy. It's usually the opposite. We can implode that way. Money and riches and all that, it's there to be shared. It's there to create that flow. That's my perspective on that.
That's wonderful. Is there a physiological aspect to giving? We feel better. Is is that just our emotion, or is there something else going on? So
it's such a great question. We should look into that. I mean, there's so much research on altruism, and I'd be really curious physiologically to see what happens in the brain of people when they act altruistically. I bet you that it has something to do with the sympathetic versus parasympathetic system. When you give to another, it feels really, really good. When you're helping someone in need, when you call someone and you're being of service to that person, often that's enough to take someone out of their own anxiety and depression. And often when a patient calls me, I'm overwhelmed with anxiety, I don't know what to do. One of the things I'll say to them, who in your life needs help right now? Who can you call? How can you get out of your own head and out of your own way? Let's see what you can do to help another, and then pull yourself out. And it's very powerful. Deliberate, yeah.
I love that, and it reminds me of something. Our colleagues and Adrian Gustig and Chester Elton have written a new book, Leading with Gratitude. And early when they were creating it, I came up with the thought that, where it's in Grace, that you really can't show gratitude unless you're grateful in your own life. And I think that's what you were just getting to with some of your patients. Am I correct? We all have something to give. And so.
Absolutely. We all have something to give, and we all have something to be grateful for. Even in the midst of chaos, even in the midst of darkness, we have to find the bright light. We have to find the gratitude. You know, people talk about gratitude lists, but there actually is a lot of data showing being grateful, being able to shift your perspective from lack and, to abundance, that has a huge impact on one's whole life. It's so easy to live in a place of lack because our capitalist mentality is all about filling that lack, figuring out how I can have more and be better. And that's all great. Enjoy that, do that, but, don't do that at the expense of your own well-being and your own gratitude. Gratitude is what's going to enable you to feel sustained happiness in the long term and true fulfillment.
Thank you. Now we're coming to the end of our conversation today, and I'd like to ask all our guests about grace. Is there a story about grace that resonates with you, either in your personal life or something you've observed that you want to share? So, Anna?
Oh, you were asking me, or you're asking our guests?
You.
I'm so sorry. That was great. I thought you were asking them.
No,
Okay.
no. I wish I could. I don't have it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for me, I have like so many stories of grace. I feel like my life is just so full of grace, and I feel so grateful for that. I think about that all the time. And whenever we go through darkness, opportunities come up that shift everything. The most recent thing was my husband and I got COVID really, really bad. My husband got it really bad. He even had to go to the hospital. And it ended up being the most wonderful thing in both of our lives because number one, because this happened, we were both like, you know what, it's time to move. The time has come. We've both been feeling it for a while, but unless we got this and got it so badly, we never would have made the choice to move to Connecticut. It never would have happened. And we are so, so glad we did. That's number one. Number two that came from this is that my husband actually was starting to have some knee pain. And whatever it was that they gave him in the hospital or COVID, he came out of the hospital, his knee pain was gone. COVID was gone and his knee pain was gone. So we feel like he was somehow given COVID in order to take away his knee pain. That's how we see it. Yeah. So that's nice.
Whatever works. And you know what? It's an anecdotal thing, but I think that there's in all this pressure and crisis, and I'm sure you share this with those your patients and stuff, that there is a way to find joy, is there not? So.
Absolutely. We were both on the call with Marshall yesterday, and I loved his piece of advice about finding a way to delight in every day, finding the joy in every day, whatever that means to you. If it means eating a certain food, eat that food. If it means taking some time for yourself to listen to music you love, great. If it means looking at photos of like the most happy time in your life, do that. If it means calling someone you love, do that. If it means jogging, do that. Whatever it is. If you can't find it, talk to your therapist and figure out how you can find it. There have been people who, by virtue of everything that's happened, have had to go on medications, and then they were able to find their joy again. That's happened too. There's biological things that make it harder for some people than others. That's a reality. I'm not saying everybody get a medic, not at all, but that's an option too for people who really, really need it and where other things haven't worked. So it's so important to figure out a way to find your joy and to use all your resources to figure out how to do that.
Well, this has been such a wonderful time speaking to you. We're speaking in a time of crisis, but Anna, you are just bubbling with optimism. And from that, I take joy. So how can people find you? So
Thank you so much, John. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. You can find me on my website, which is Anna Yusim, ANNAYUSIM as in Mary at gmail. Oh, that's my phone, email at
that's
gmail.com.
okay.
AnnaYusim.com. And of course, on LinkedIn. I'm sure there'll be a link to it on LinkedIn.
And also, there's a thing called Google, which if you Google Dr. Anna Yusim, you will find her lots of things. You'll find her academic articles as well as her how to get in contact with her. So it's been a joy. It's been another wonderful episode of Grace Under Pressure. It's been a thrill to speak to you, and we're going to close right now. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you, John. That was so much fun, as always.